more. Let's bring in Democratic Virginia Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, who represents the Commonwealth's 7th District, which includes, among other things, Henrico County. The Congresswoman's also a former CIA case officer who worked on counterterrorism cases. Ms. Spanberger, thank you for joining us. We see you this week as the U.S. House is poised to pass this sweeping, overarching gun bill. It bans high-capacity magazines, bump stocks. It raises the age to purchase some semi-automatics. But you've been urging fellow Democrats to break it up into individual bills. Why so?
That's right. Well, and I think importantly, one of the premises on which we have kind of founded this idea is this package that Congress is proposing is comprised of 8 different bills. 8 different bills that do different things. Safe storage related legislation, changes to magazine capacity and what's permissible for magazine capacity, a ban on large capacity magazines. Importantly, raising the age at which one can purchase an assault style rifle, right? Various different pieces of legislation. They do different things. They focus on different parts of the problem, and they respond to different needs. And our goal as legislators should be to send bills over to the Senate with the maximum possible amount of support. And what we know is that these different components of the bill, and certainly it was mentioned even in that letter, that open letter from Texas Republicans, that they were talking about a potential support for raising the age limit. So there's a place where even we see it within constituencies in Texas voicing their opinions in support of raises in the age limit. Why not have that bill get its own standalone vote so we can see just how much support exists for that bill, how much support exists for banning straw purchases, how much support exists for the other elements, the 8 elements that are part of this larger proposed package. Now, to be very clear, everyone who signed on to our letter requesting that these bills be brought separately, in our letter stated our intention to vote for every single one of them. But I want to vote for them individually, as do my counterparts who signed on to this letter. Let's vote bill after bill after bill. We want to demonstrate through our votes our support for these individual components. And we also want to recognize that in order to send a bill to the president's desk, which should be every legislator's final goal, we have to demonstrate that it can get support across a broader coalition. The numbers within the United States Senate demand it. And so by voting on each of these bills individually, we could demonstrate through votes which bills have the most support and a possible trajectory to get on President Biden's desk.
We're showing some of our new CBS News polling numbers, which, among other things, Congresswoman, shows a majority of Americans supporting some new restrictions on assault weapons. So what do you make of what the Senate group is discussing, a much more incremental, smaller in scope set of changes, including increasing the availability of states to get money for red flag laws? Would that be sufficient in your district?
Well, certainly, I think what's important is that we take action and we send a bill to the president's desk. And certainly the suite of bills that I would vote for and the suite of bills I would like to send to the president's desk may not be what we ultimately are able to send to the president's desk. But when we talk about each of these proposals individually, so let's talk about red flag laws, extreme risk protective orders. What we know is that in states where extreme risk protective orders are in place, that gives law enforcement officers a tool to use when there are reports from friends or family members that someone might be in crisis. And certainly what we know is that Florida and the Republican state legislature and the Republican governor signed red flag laws into place because before the Parkland massacre, people reported that would-be murderer to law enforcement. They had deep concerns about him and his intentions. Law enforcement went out, federal and local, went out and spoke to him, but there was no action they could take absent the existence of gun violence restraining orders, absent the existence of extreme risk protective orders. So Florida took this step forward knowing that the data show that when extreme risk protective order laws are in place, the numbers of people who do harm to themselves, suicide by firearms, go down. The number of people who are able to murder or shoot their loved one, oftentimes a domestic partner, in time of crisis, go down. And the number of law enforcement who are responding to crises where there are guns involved go down. And that's an issue of officer safety. It's also an issue of, keeping our communities safe. And certainly within the circumstance that we saw within Parkland, people were worried about that man. They reported him to law enforcement. At the time, law enforcement could take no steps forward. So being able to show the support for extremist protective order legislation in the House, certainly in the Senate, if we were to pass that legislation, that is a step forward. Now, it's not everything that we need to do and should do, but it's one of them. And that is what I am looking at. That is how I view this. All of these things that we could do, if we're looking at raising the age at which one can buy an assault-style rifle, we know that the murderer in Uvalde, Texas, and the murderer in Buffalo bought those assault-style rifles shortly after their 18th birthday. Raising that age to 21, which is the age at which one can purchase a handgun, creating parity there, would have had a major impact, at least in those two horrific circumstances. So the steps forward I want to see are making common sense changes to ensure that we can really, truly get at the heart of some of the weaknesses within our laws. Notably also talking about large capacity magazines. We know that when there are limits on magazine capacity, the number of fatalities go down. When there have been shootings where large capacity magazines are utilized, it's a more than 60% increase in fatality.
Have you gotten some indication from have you gotten some indication from the House leaders or a response from them they might be willing to break this up into a magazines bill, an assault weapons purchase bill, or have they not responded yet?
So certainly there's tremendous support for breaking up. And again, it's actually just voting on the bills as bills. So it's not necessarily breaking them up. It's choosing not to lump them all together. And so voting on them one by one. I have yet to find a member of Congress, with the exception of one or two decision makers, who isn't in support of voting on them one by one and who isn't opposed to actually lumping them together in a package.
But the decision makers are keeping this in one package at this point.
As of right now, we're continuing to say they're individual bills. They do different things. Let's vote on them one by one and set them up for their maximum success by demonstrating the maximum support that each of these individual provisions can get. Because we know that once they're put together, for somebody who might be willing to vote for raising the age, but opposed to, let's say, large capacity magazine bans, now that person who would have come to the table, who would have voted in support of one of those pieces of legislation, is now voting against effectively both of them. So from a pragmatic standpoint, if our goal is to get bills to the president's desk, taking these bills as individuals rather than clumping them together is the optimal strategy that many members of Congress are advocating for.
Let's shift gears for one final question, ma'am. Obviously, the January 6th committee has its first primetime revelatory hearing Thursday night. Do you think there are people with open minds who are persuadable by what they show?
So I do hope that there are people who read about January 6th, who certainly saw the early days of the reports of it on the 6th, on the few days that followed, and then got on with their lives and haven't been tuned into all of the ins and outs of what happened, what led to it. The purpose of this committee is to explain exactly that. What led to that day, who was involved, what happened that day. And frankly, there's a lot of information related to what led to that day and what happened that day that just hasn't yet been made, either made public or made public in such a way that it's available for kind of mass consumption for people who are busy with their jobs and busy with their kids and busy with the challenges that we continue to face as Americans. So I do think that there will be information that will be presented in a succinct and direct manner that will be new to many Americans as they tune in or as they read the reports of what occurred in the days after the first hearing.
From the 7th District of Virginia, Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.